Shalom uvracha from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. With the help of Hashem, we continue our study of Pirkei Avot. We continue our joint study of the ethics of the fathers. This evening, we are privileged to study Chapter 2, Mishna 3. Perek Bet, Pirkei Avot, Mishnah Gimel. Those following, and those people who have joined us in previous weeks, remember that the teacher of our Mishnah is Rabban Gamliel, son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. We're talking about the very end of the period of the Tanaim, very end of the period of the early rabbis, the rabbis of the Mishnah. He is maybe the last, or towards the last, of all of those great sages. Many of us think that maybe Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the end. This is his son, Rabban Gamliel Beno Shel Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. We spoke about him in previous classes. Mishnah Gimel. Hevu Zihirin Barashut. Be very careful when dealing with government. Be very careful in dealing with rulers, with politicians. Baruch Hashem, we're in Israel now just a few weeks before the elections. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help. They should be the ultimate level of blessing should come forth from the results of these elections, and not only the results of the elections, but Bezrat Hashem, even the preparatory stages to the elections, I hope should bring the highest level of bracha. But it seems very appropriate or very important to study our Mishnah before one enters the world of elections and politics. Many people study our Mishnah to teach. Be very careful, generally, about politicians. Now, unquestionably, there are some very, very great politicians in the world. Unquestionably, there are very great people who dedicated their lives selflessly to trying to help people through their positions in government and in politics. However, Rabban Gamliel, son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, warns, be careful. Hevu Zihirin Barashut. Now, the word Rashut is an interesting word. There are many discussions about the origin of the word Rashut. Does Rashut come from the word Rishut? Rishut means permission. Maybe the government, maybe the leaders of government, maybe the rulers can just do whatever they want. Rishut, they have permission to, that's why they call it perhaps Rishut, or Rashut. Permission granted to do as they see fit, since they are the ones who are running the countries. Or is Rashut, in our text it's spelled Resh Shin Vav Tav. Are there readings of our Mishnah where it's to be understood with an Aleph? Not Rashut Resh Shin Vav Tav, but perhaps Resh Aleph Shin Vav Tav, which would mean Rashut, from the word Rosh, for the people who are the head, Rashut. Be that as it may, Rabban Gamliel is teaching, be very careful. Be very careful with politics. And Chas v'Shalom, I don't want anyone to walk out of our study here, or those watching, to say that the Mishnah, invalidated politicians. Be careful. Be careful. It's a great challenge, and there are people who have met this challenge. But no one should think that Rabban Gamliel is saying dismiss it completely. Be careful. We pray for the welfare of government, as we will learn with the help of Hashem, the continuation of Pirkei Avot. Beware of rulers. She'ein mikarevim lo le'adam ela l'tzorech atzman. For so often they befriend people for their own selfish benefit. She'ein, sometimes it seems as if, wow, this is a great idealist. This is a great government leader. And they're surely interested in the welfare of the society. And there are such people. And there are such leaders. Be careful. Because it happens, she'ein mikarevim lo la'adam ela l'tzorech atzman. In the previous Mishnah, we studied how Rabban Gamliel taught us about the importance, if you remember, at the end of Mishnah Bet, v'chol ha'osekim im hatzibur yiyu osekim imahem l'shem shamayim. We learned, I believe it was last week or 2 weeks ago, Rabbi Gamliel taught us about the importance of being involved in communal activities for the sake of heaven, for great lofty ideas. In this Mishnah, Rabban Gamliel teaches, and it could or should be studied as a contrast to the previous Mishnah. In contrast to this concept of l'shem shamayim, v'chol ha'osekim im hasibur yiyu osekim imhem l'shem shamayim, for the greatest good, for the sake of heaven. Unfortunately, it happens that ein mekarevim lo la'adam ela l'tzorech atzman. Whatever whatever is convenient at that moment, that is the pathway that they will take. Certain leaders, and for their own sake, l'tzorech atzman. Nir'in ke'ohavim b'sha'at hana'atan, when it benefits them, when there's hana'ah, so they seem to be ever so friendly. I'm sure no one intends it to be this way. Did you ever read a list of promises, vows, commitments that certain politicians make in all parts of the world? I don't want to chas v'shalom talk about Eretz Yisrael in any negative way, and therefore I will avoid any discussion of anything here. I don't want to speak about anything negative, but have you ever encountered in your studies of politics, political science, or analysis of elections, did you ever compare the promises that certain people make before they're elected, and then you look back, let's say after their years in office, and you say, oh, did they fulfill that which they said? I wish I could tell you yes. The answer is 100% yes. But the Rabban Gamliel says, well, not necessarily, right? She'ein mekarvim lo la'adam ela l'tzorech atzman nir'in ke'ohavim. They really seem to be so close to you. They really seem to love you. They really seem to be interested in you. They seem to act so amicably to you. Ohavim, they're so friendly. B'sha'at hana'atan, when it suits them well. Not necessarily when it suits you well. Ve'ein omedim lo la'adam chas v'shalom b'sha'at dachko. And they're not necessarily there. They don't stand by to help the individual in their time of stress, in their time of need. Be careful. Don't rely upon that. We have so many examples in history where we thought that surely they would remember. The most famous example, I believe, is the example of Yosef HaSadiq. Saved the whole country. Yosef's wisdom, Paro is amazed at his wisdom. Ein navon, the Chacham Kamo, Yosef saved Egypt. And then you read, sometimes with a tear or two in our eyes, Vayakam Melech Chadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yada et Yosef. A new Pharaoh arises, doesn't know about Yosef. How can you not know about Yosef? Yosef is in the annals of history. Asher lo yada et Yosef. And I wish I could say this only happened once. It didn't happen only once. It did not happen only once. I mean, Kohelet speaks in chapter 9, verse 15. He speaks about Ish Miskein Chacham Milatu et Ha'ir b'chokhmato. This wise man who is struggling, who has difficulties, and saves the city as a result of his wisdom. And then he speaks there about the tragedy of V'adam, I'm quoting, V'adam lo zachar Et ha'ish hamiskein havu. But it happens sometimes that the people don't even remember the Ish HaMiskein who saved the city. I have in front of me today the Art Scroll edition of Pirkei Avot. You get that on the... This is Ethics of the Fathers and Sages Guide to Living, written by Rabbi Moshe Lieber. A wonderful commentary that Art Scroll put out on Pirkei Avot. And he cites an example, the example from Spain. You know, I'll read what he writes here. He says, a striking example of this took place in the royal house of Spain. Don Yitzchak Abarbanel, the famous great rabbi, served as a royal treasurer to Ferdinand and Isabella and enabled Spain to finance the reconquest of the country from Muslim domination. He saved, he was a prominent leader in Spain. We know him, of course, from his religious writings, from the Perush of the Abarbanel, the writings of the Abarbanel. He was all the way up there in government. However, when he saved Spain, once this was accomplished, Spain no longer needed its Jews. And Chas v'Shalom, everybody knows, the infamous decree of expulsion in 1492. I don't have any criticism of my history teachers, but we didn't learn that. I think I was in high school. I went to a great elementary school, and Hashem blessed it. But 1492, we always had to memorize about Christopher Columbus, you know. It took me such a long time to learn. Maybe I'm a slow learner, so maybe it took me, maybe everybody else understood it in 5th grade also, but I didn't. 1492, I wouldn't teach 1492 as just like the year of the Christopher Columbus's, a sailing of those famous ships. 1492, the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. And the Abarbanel is standing pleading, In 1492, Abarbanel pleaded for stay. And he offered a huge prize. Abarbanel, he's all the way there. To no avail. All of the Abarbanel, excuse me, all of the Abarbanel's service to the national cause became worthless in a moment. His efforts on the royals' behalf were quickly forgotten, and his ungrateful employers turned their backs on him and on his people. Be careful. Be careful. She'ein mikarvim lo la'adam, when they need you. Okay, you're in, and and ohavim. L'tzorech atzman. Nir'im ke'ohavim. B'sha'at hana'atan. Ve'ein omdim lo la'adam. B'sha'at tachkom. Now, Rabbi Lieber quotes here an interpretation from Leiv Avos. He spells it A-V-O-S. I don't think it would be right if I pronounce it Avot. Maybe it should be pronounced Avoth, with a thuf, I don't know. But he writes A-V-O-S out of respect to this great teacher whose book I'm studying this evening. In Leiv Avot, but the problem is I don't know which Leiv Avot he's quoting. There are at least 4 commentaries on Pirkei Avot called Leiv Avot. So I don't know which. I think there are more than 4, but maybe he has a list here somewhere of the bibliography. I don't know. I didn't see it, but he says the Leiv Avot is a different reading on this text, and I'd just like to share that also. He interprets our Mishnah as a continuation of instruction, not how to view the leaders, not how to view the leaders, but how the leaders should behave. What are the proper levels of behavior of public officers? They are urged to solicit the commission of their constituent groups before they pursue any public course of action. He takes the Mishnah and he reads it completely differently. Havu zihirin b'reshut. Make sure you have reshut. Make sure that if you're the leader, right? We were learning last Mishnah, kolos kivat tzibur, the people who are in charge of the community, the people who are involved in community. If you're in charge of the community, don't just do things on your own. Consult with the people. Get a feel for what the people want and what the people need. Because you can't just superimpose your will on the people. For the community appoints leaders for their own benefit. They yes, you're the leader, but they want you to produce the goods. If a public servant should do something that they view as detrimental to their welfare, Even if they did it inadvertently, they'll lay the full blame on him. He takes our Mishnah, you understand? Are you following? Yes or no? He takes our Mishnah, he turns it around. Not about how you should view government. He's saying how the government should view the people and take their feelings into consideration. A public figure would do well to be sure that he has the mandate of the people before taking action. Because even if they seem to you to be so close and so friendly, they have certain demands. It's very interesting. I was just like so moved by this approach, which is completely different than the general way of reading this Mishnah. And it reminded me of one of these sections in the Book of Kings. If you remember the 12th chapter, of Kings 1, Melachim Aleph Pirkei Avot, where Rechavam, son of Shlomo, takes over the kingdom after the death of his father. And he doesn't know exactly which approach should he take. How should he relate to the people? Remember that section? And he consults with two different groups of people. He consults with the elders, with the older sages, and he consults with his peers and contemporaries. And maybe I'll read a little bit from Melachim. It says there, "Vayivatz hamelech Rechavam et hazakenim." Rechavam consulted with those elderly sages. What should I do? How should I treat the people? How should you treat the people? You should be as tough as you can. You have to make sure that they know who's the boss. And you have to put your foot down. You have to tell them, whatever my father did, I'm going to do much more. And my government is going to be the harshest government. Which counsel do you give me to deal with the people? So I'm sorry, I made a mistake. The Skadim said the opposite. But I'm not going to redo the YouTube. But I ask you, does the Skadim say? Again, I want to correct myself, and I think to.
נהפוך הוא.
Of course. נכון, בדיוק.
זה נהפוך הוא בלי סליחה, זה נהפוך הוא גם
וידברו. Again, he consults with two groups of people. And then what about the people who close the YouTube? As soon as they hear that there's such a horrible mistake, this man doesn't know what he's talking about, and he quotes the Book of Malachim incorrectly. They never get to see the end. So it's not my fault. I tried to. There was a concept of tshuva. Rechavam consults with two groups. He consults with the Zakinim, and he consults with the Ne'arim. In the text they're called Yiladim. Yiladim. He knew them, when they were even young children, right? And the Zakinim tell him the way to really rule, and I quote, "Vayidavru elav lemor." You should humble yourself before the people. Im hayom tihiyeh eved la'am hazeh. If you Rechavam, if you will just show them that you're humbled before them. I see it, I hope my association is correct, I see it similar to the way that Pirkei Avot here is quoted as understanding our Mishnah. And you will serve them. V'dibarta alehem devarim tovim. And you'll speak to them words which they like to hear. Ultimately, you will really have success as a king. V'hayu lecha avadim kol hayamim. That's their suggestion. The suggestion of the elders is don't be so tough. Don't be so strong. Don't be so exacting. Walk with the people in a kind, sensitive way. Vayazov et atzat hazakenim, it says there. He left the council of the elders, and then he went vayivatz et hayeladim asher gadlu ito. But what do the younger people think? And they said, "Ko tomar la'am hazeh, ko tidaber aleh." This is what you should tell them. Katani ava. If you think that my father was tough, Katani ava mimatnei avi. What you had, the rules of the Shlomo HaMelech, we learned in the book of Malachim, how many people were drafted to do various levels of work. You think my father was tough? You haven't heard anything yet, V'ata avihem misalechem ol kaved v'ani osif. I'll even add stronger and stronger rules and regulations. Avi saretchem bashotim v'ani ba'akrabim. It'll be much more difficult. And the younger people felt that that's the way to rule. V'lo shama hamelech. The king did not listen to the counsel of the elder sages. Ki hayta siba me'im Hashem. So maybe, according to Leiv Avos, did not look up the source. I don't like to quote secondary sources. I should have looked for the book, but there's an Ishna on quoting it. I just don't know the name of the author of Leiv Avos. Leiv Avos seems to be saying, listen to the people. Hevu zehirim barashut. Make sure that what you're doing is done with the permission of the people, because maybe that's the ultimate way of establishing the proper form of government. HaKadosh Baruch Hu help us here in Eretz Yisrael and throughout the world, the ultimate levels of the true form of honest, blessed, sweet, holy government. And Bezrat Hashem, way before the elections, we should all celebrate the kingdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Taken Olam Malchut Shakai, the Bezrat Hashem, Uvikshu, Et Hashem Elokeihem Ve'et David Malkam. We should all celebrate together with Mashiach, the ultimate leader. Thank you so much for listening.